Hey all you howdy rowdy partners out there. It's me Nasty Jack here to read another chapter of my sweet sour audio boom. My producer said that I have to give a short intro for each chapter, so I'm just rolling with it. But for real I hate Stan, I wish he would just go jump in a river or something. Anyway, let's get this bread. The Scary House. Chapter 3. Mr. Mike's Diary. Written and narrated by Nasty Jack. The sight of the diary struck paralyzing fear right into my gooey bones. I wondered to myself if the skeleton holding it was Mr. Mike himself, or some other unlucky noob that I could smoke and Halo 3 any day. More uneasy thoughts began to creep into my mind. Should I try to take the diary? Should I just bail before I wet my pants for the third time? And how could someone die and decay into a skeleton in a house that was built in 2006? Some things weren't adding up. I stood for a few minutes under the single dimly lit light, unsure what to do next. Eventually my curiosity grew into courage. I readjusted my detective hat and shaking, slowly made my way to the lazy boy the skeleton was resting in across the room, one foot after the other. I was face to face with the skeleton at that point, its creepy bony hands grasping the diary tightly. I'd never been that close to death before. Its presence was unnerving. The skeleton was still wearing remnants of tattered clothing. A yellowish shirt with what looked like some sick nasty wolves on it, some jorts that I was super jealous of, socks and sandals boy oh howdy, and a pair of red glasses. One of the lenses was cracked and the other was entirely missing. My mind was transported back to a picture I had once seen from a few years ago. It was of some old townsfolk standing outside of the diner that had just opened. Mr. Mike was in the picture. He was wearing the same glasses. Poor Mr. Mike, I thought to myself. I wonder what happened to him. My gaze fell back down to the diary the skeleton was grasping in its lap, and my heart began to race. I paused. Then slowly brought up my hand to reach for it. One of my fingers touched it. Then another finger, and another, until I had a good grip with one hand. The leather was cool to the touch and the bedazzlement was blinding to my eyeballs. I gave the diary a tug, but it didn't budge. Then I reached out with my other hand and grabbed hold. With both hands I pulled back and tore the diary away, but one of the hands from the skeleton came with it. I gave a little shriek like my mama did when she saw me after I was born. I recomposed myself and pulled off the hand. I turned the diary over to take another look at the fine craftsmanship of the bedazzling. It was pretty dank meme dreams litness if I'm being completely honest with you. But there was a buckle that held the diary shut. Slowly, I pressed the rounded bedazzled button that was on it. It unbuckled itself with a satisfying click, and I opened Mr. Mike's diary to the first page, and began to read. Hey all y'all haters listening to this wonderful audio boom, it's me Nasty Jack here to tell you about our good bad sponsors for today's episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Doritos and Mountain Dew. Have you ever been playing Halo 3 and needed some extra energy to keep you pounding noobs for an additional 6 hours? Or have you ever woken up in the morning and really needed to pee like a screaming banshee? Well, Doritos and Mountain Dew are your one-stop solution for any hunger or energy needs. Doritos have such exciting flavors like nacho cheese, Cool Ranch, sweet spicy chili, Baja Picante, and Peking duck. Mountain Dew also has some interesting flavors, but you can basically just throw them all away except for Baja Blast. Just go ahead and chug that stuff until your brain's Baja Blast the crap out of your flipping mind. It's so ding dang fling-ailing good. Make sure you're 21 to buy it because that stuff will really mess you up if you catch my drift. Truth be told, my mom told me the producers for the show called her and said that our sponsors pulled out for this episode, so I had to make some up. Sorry Mama and Papa and all of my listeners out there. I hope you will find it in your big butts and even bigger hearts to forgive me. Okay, now back to the show. Yeah brother. The first page of the diary was scary to read, a bit funny to lol, and now that I'm thinking about it, it really was inspirational to me on a deep spiritual and emotional level. Here's what the first page said. Dear Diary. It's me, Mr. Mike. Today is Tuesday. I had a chicken tendy for lunch. Okay, please write me back I love you. Love, Mr. Mike. Obviously this dude had no clue how diaries worked. Lol, what an idiot. Of course diaries cannot write you back if they're buckled. Anyway, I began to finger through the other entries in the diary. They began innocent enough. Mr. Mike often wrote about his day-to-day goings-on and some of his thoughts on the sphere of the modern-day gaming industry. I ripped those sweet pages out for future use, but don't tell anyone, especially my mama. She would ground me for another 3 weeks if she found out that I did that. Yikes. Lol, well. As I continued to read, the entries grew more and more strange. Mr. Mike would often obsess about specific individuals in our town, writing about how he wanted to make them his special friends and I quote, lure them back to his house where he can keep them and watch them for as long as he desired. I flipped toward the end of the diary with warranted hesitation. I had to know what it said. The last page was immediately different than the rest. It seemed as though it was written much more hastily, the ink sprawled all over the place, as if he didn't have enough time to write as he normally did. This is what it said. He's onto me. He knows what I've been up to. He found out that Miss Betty hasn't returned home in 3 days and he's on his way to confront me about it as I'm writing. He doesn't understand. How could he possibly understand? He has no idea of the life that I've lived, the things I've gone through and what I've witnessed. He's nothing but a child. A foolish, hairy child. But there was something about the look in his eyes. Like he knew something I didn't. When he gets here I'll. The sentence stopped there in the diary entry. There were 2 words at the bottom of the page that were more scribbly-squabbly than the rest. After a moment I was able to make out what Mr. Mike's final words were. It said, he's here. A chill ran down my spine and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Hot dang jingly jang, I wondered what Mr. Mike had been doing in his house before he died. His skeleton was now even more off-putting than before. But dang, I was still mad jelly of those sweet jorts. I began to mull over his writings. Miss Betty? I'm not entirely sure, but I thought that was the name of Sally's mom. Apparently her mom died when Sally was only 40 years old. Could Mr. Mike have given her that bad sad mad tad bit of death juice to off her? And who was the boy he was writing about? How did he find out what Mr. Mike had been doing in his house? And what about the chicken tendy he had for lunch? Did he eat it plain, or did he dip it in some good homemade cane sauce? Although I was scared straight out of my jimmies, my inner detective knew I had some digging to do. I tucked Mr. Mike's diary under my arm and started looking for clues. I turned the light on my phone back on since I really couldn't see anything in the room outside of the light looming above me and Mr. Mike's bony stony bones. I looked to my left, then I looked to my right. A few feet in front of me, lying on the floor, was a small pile of debris. I got closer. Looking more intently I could see that it was a pile of discarded sunflower seed shells. My mind started racing. At that point I was super creeped out of my brand new undies my mama bought for me just yesterday. Luckily I had their support. But I had enough. The creepy diary, Mr. Mike's skeleton gaping at me, and having found more sunflower seeds, I knew I needed to get out of that hecking ding dang sad time bad time not so yeah my dude's scary house. I turned to run back up the stairs I came down, but a figure stood in my way. I fell back on the floor in shock, smacking my thick butt cheeks on the wood. I looked up to see who the figure was. It slowly walked into the light. "Hello Nasty Jack," I heard a boyish voice slowly whisper. It was Pickle Rick. This audiobook is copyrighted by Nasty Jack Cool Storytime Incorporated.